What's good, guys? We're back again today with another Hytopia SDK tutorial. If you don't know me, my name is Ash, and today we're going to look at the push the spider example from the Getting Started guide and also how to create your own map and import it into your game. If you haven't gotten set up at all yet with Hytopia, I recommend you watch my last video where I show you all of the setup. But assuming you've already done that, let's jump right in. So the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to create a new folder where we're going to put our new game. So I'm in the folder that I like to keep my Hytopia stuff, and I'm just going to create a new folder and call it Push the Spider. You might remember me saying that it's better not to have spaces in these folder names, so I just used a dash instead of spaces. All right, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure bun is up to date. So I'm going to open my terminal, and I'm just going to say bun update, and that'll update bun and Hytopia if it's not up to date. And then the next thing I'm going to do is open cursor. So I'm going to open the folder that I just created inside of cursor. Or you can go to file, open folder to get to it. And then I'm also going to show the sidebar by going appearance, secondary sidebar, turning that on. And then I'm going to open the terminal that's right inside of cursor. So you can go to the top and go to terminal, new terminal, and this will open up a terminal that's already located inside the folder that you want to work in. So now that I'm here, I can go ahead and initialize the new Hytopia file. So I'm going to say bunx Hytopia init, just like we did in the last video, and hit enter. And this will download all of the folders and files that we need for this new project. Okay, and that's done, and obviously it says I can start my new server by saying bun -- watch index.ts, and that's going to open the server. So let's go to my server, and already something is wrong. So let's take a look at what's wrong. Okay, this is a lot of stuff, but if we go all the way to the top, it's having a problem with the connection. So let's just look at our file really fast. All right, after digging into this issue a little bit, it looks like some of the file paths seem to be wrong in the index file. So we're just going to fix those quick. It might be fixed by the time you're watching this, but if it's not, let me just show you how to fix this really fast. So right now, the game is looking for the world map from this location, assets/map.json, but there is no map.json file in this location. Instead, they have a maps folder, and in the maps folder, it's boilerplate.json. So we're going to change this to say assets/maps/boilerplate.json. That's where the map file actually is. And then if you scroll down also to the player model, this thing is also incorrect. So we're going to change this to match where this player.gltf is actually located, which is in models, players, and then you can see that player file. So again, I'm going to change this file path to be correct. I'm going to say model/players/player, and that should also fix that one. Maybe this will be fixed by the time you're doing this, but just in case it's not, that's how you fix this really long, crazy error that won't let you load the server. So once I've done that, I'm going to press save, and then the server is actually running. And here we go. Okay, so this is our initialization file we're in, and everything seems to be working fine. So let's go to the dev website, dev.hytopia.com. I'll put the link in the description, and then this create your first game link is where we want to be to do this push the spider example. So we've already done a few different things from the last video. So we're going to skip all the way down to step number 5, where it talks about creating an entity. And it goes into a brief explanation of what an entity is in Hytopia. And basically, it's just a rigid body with one or more colliders. And I highly recommend you read everything they've written here about this because it's kind of important. But basically, a rigid body is just like a solid thing that interacts with the physics of the world. And then the collider is the invisible thing around it that detects when things run into it, and that determines what happens in the game, and you get to determine what those things are that happen when things collide. All right, so let's go down here to this example of creating a spider entity. They have all the code written here. We could just copy and paste it all in, but I just want to look at a couple of things. So you'll notice at the top of the index file that we got when we downloaded it, it's got this import section. And this is importing some different things directly from Hytopia. So right now we're downloading start server, audio, game server, and player entity. But you'll see inside of this code, there's a few extra things that are being downloaded. And this is because to access the methods and the properties of these things, you have to import them from the server. So looks like we're missing collider shape, we're missing entity, and we're missing the rigid body type. So I'm just going to copy those things and add them into the import section so that we can access it later. Then we also need the rigid body type. Okay, so now that we're importing those things, we have the next line, which is start server world. You might notice that we already have that in our code, so we don't need to copy that over again, right? So let's move on, and we've got this spider code begins right here. So I'm going to start from the note just so we have the note, and I'm going to copy down, and I'm going to end right here after the semicolon that's attached to the spider.spawn line of code. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So you might remember me talking about last time how important the punctuation is. And you'll notice that start server world opens right here. And you can see where that ends just by following this line all the way down, and you can see it ends right here. If we were to paste our code after that and hit save, we're going to get an error. And that's because the code is not a part of the server, right? We pasted it after the server callback was already closed. So that's not going to work. So it's really important that when you're copy and pasting code over from example games or something like that you make sure you put it in the correct place. You don't want to interrupt a different function by pasting your code right in the middle of it. So you want to make sure you're doing it in the right place. So to avoid messing anything else up, I'm just going to go ahead and paste the spider code up towards the top, maybe before the player is joined. And remember, formatting is really important. While formatting is not going to change how the code reads, it will change your ability to see what's happening. So I'm going to make sure I don't start it here to break up this line. Instead, I'm going to just hit space a few times and make sure it's in its own spot. And I'm going to hit save. And now if we go back to our server, you can see that we have our spider. And so just a couple of things to look at with the spider code right here. So we're giving it a name, we're giving it a constant, and it's named spider. And it's a new entity, and all the properties related to entities we've imported now from the server up here, which is why it was important to add that line of code. So we've got a new entity, and we've got the model URI, and that's the location of the file. So you can see that under models, NPCs, we've got a spider file right there, which is why it's able to load. You could change this. So let's say we wanted to bring in the mind flayer. I don't even know what that is, but let's bring it in. So if we change the spider to the mind flayer and saved that, it'll access that model instead. So let's see what that is. Oh my gosh. Okay. So that's this dude. And he's massive because of the next line of code, which I'll show you how to change. So right now the model scale is saying 2.5. If I were to change this to 1, for example, it'll get smaller. So you can scale up and down your models however you want based on the number that you put in this model scale. I'm going to go back to the spider though, since this is a spider game. Change it to spider, and I believe it was 2.5, and hit save. And we can see our spider is back. All right. And this other property here is model looped animations. Some of these files will have a walking animation, a running animation, an idle animation, which are designated within the GLTF file itself. So this is how you would change the animations based on what's happening in your game. You would do it with this model looped animation property. So that's how we created the entity, but now we need to spawn the entity. So the way we do that is by using the spawn method, which is a method that belongs to the entity class, which we imported. And because we gave the spider a constant here, we can just call it by the thing that we named it there. So spider.spawn, and then the way that you properly do this according to the information is world, comma, and this is the location of the spider. So let's say I wanted to move it 3 over. I could hit save. And you can see that the spider kind of slightly moved over. Let's say I wanted to move it even closer to the edge. I could keep increasing that X value. And you can see now the spider's over there. You'll notice though, when you hover over spawn, there's a third optional parameter, which is rotation. So if you don't like the direction that your model is facing, you can change it with the rotation. So you would do that by adding a comma and adding coordinates again. So we've got X colon number, Y colon number, Z colon number, but we have a fourth one now, which is W. All right, so let's rotate the spider around until we can get it facing correctly. I'm not exactly sure which one of these to rotate. It's probably the Y. Let's see. If we rotate the Y by 3, yeah. So we rotated the Y and it spun along the Y axis. So the Y is the up and down. So rotating around Y is going to spin it around. So we learned a lot there. So we learned how to create a new entity. We learned how to change out the model, how to change the size, how to spawn it, how to change the location of it, and how to rotate it. All right, so the next thing we're going to learn is how to make it actually do something. So going back to the dev website, we can scroll down. Again, really good to read all this stuff because it explains it all pretty well. But let's make the spider do something. So we have our previous code here, and now we have this new block of code that starts with spider on collision. So we're going to copy all of this on collision code. We're not going to copy the spawn code again. We're just going to copy spider on collision, and we're going to end right here. So since we're adding this code about the spider, we want to make sure we're adding it before we spawn the spider. We don't want to add it after the spider is already spawned. So I'm in between my creation of the spider and where I'm spawning the spider, and I'm going to paste in that new block of code, and I'm going to hit save. And let's just take a look at what it does really fast. So now if I run into the spider, you can see that it moves. All right, so let's go back to the code and just talk about what this is doing now. So you might remember before we were using the spawn method to spawn the spider. Now we're going to use the onEntity collision to create a collision event with the spider. So onEntity collision is a method of the spider. Again, we've named the spider here, which is why we can use that name here. And let's just hover over this and just read what it says for a second. It says this is a function that is called when an entity collides with another entity. This must be set before the entity is spawned, which we've done. And the first parameter is the entity, which is the entity the instance the collision is for. So the spider in our case. The second parameter is the other entity that collides with the spider. And then the third parameter is whether the collision started or ended. So that's a true or false. So now we've got all these parameters defined within the next parentheses. So we've got the entity that is being collided with, which is our spider. So we're calling it spider entity, and it is an entity. And then we've got the entity that's running into it, which we're going to be calling other entity, and that is also an entity. And then we're saying for started, we're saying Boolean, which means true. All right, so the next bit of code can be a little bit intimidating, but it will make sense if you just stick with it. So up here within these parameters, we've defined what we're going to be calling things within the next block of code. So the first constant that we're defining here, we're calling it hit direction, and we're looking for the direction from rotation from the other entity. Direction from rotation is a property that's defined in the SDK. After this, I'll show you where you can find these things. But direction from rotation is a property in the SDK, and right now we're saying, get this information, the direction from rotation, get this from the other entity when they collide. And then once you have that, assign it to hit direction. That's what we're calling it. In this next function, we're saying console.log, and in parentheses, it says hit direction. And what this is doing, it's logging the hit direction in the console. You remember we hit the spider 2 different times before. And so right here in the console, the same place that we started our server, we can see this being logged. And this is the direction that I was facing when I hit the spider, and it's been logged here. So anytime you want to log something in the console, it's console.log, and then in parentheses, in this case, we're logging the hit direction. All right, on this next line, we are again defining a constant called spider mass, and we're saying spider entity.mass means get the mass from the spider entity. And again, the mass is a property of a rigid body, which we will look at in a minute. So we're saying get the mass from the spider entity and call it spider mass. And now this next line, this is the actual code where most of the work is happening. We're saying apply impulse, which is a method of a rigid body. So we're saying apply impulse to the spider, and this is what needs to happen. So on the X, you can see we've got hit direction.x. So this is saying take the X coordinate from the hit direction that we defined and make it negative. Multiply it by 10 and multiply it by the spider mass. The Y coordinate, we're saying multiply it by 10 times the spider mass, and the Z coordinate, we're saying the negative Z coordinate of the hit direction times 10 times the spider mass. And that's what's making the spider move. So let's say we didn't like how far the spider moved. Instead of multiplying the spider mass times 10, we could multiply it by 5. And we're going to hit save. And now when we go back in our game and we run into the spider, it's not going to go as far before. So before you remember, it went all the way almost to the corner. If I hit it this time, it doesn't go as far. What if we wrote code like this and we forgot to put the negatives in? What would happen? Well, instead of the spider moving away from us when we hit it, it's going to move towards us. All right, so hopefully all that makes sense. But basically, to summarize, when you have an entity collision, you have to define what's getting collided with, what's running into it, and if it started as true or false. And then after that, you can tell it whatever you want to do. Let's say I wanted to make sure it's actually running into it. I could say console.log spider hit. If you want to say words, by the way, in the console, you need to do it in quotes. So console.log spider hit. I'm going to save that. I'm going to run into the spider. And then we're going to go back to the terminal. And you can see it said spider hit. And then it still logged the direction because we logged that here. So I know that's a lot of information, but it's super, super important because collisions make up so many of the things that happen in your game. It's important to understand what this means, how to do them. Really fast though, let's go back to the SDK though, and we're going to go to the API reference, and we're going to look at the rigid body in the API reference. So if you click on rigid body, as you scroll, you can see all of the properties of the rigid body. You can see all of the methods for the rigid body. So in this example, we used direction from rotation to return the direction to us that we were facing when we hit it. And we also used the method apply impulse to apply, the hit that moved the spider. You can dig through here and see all your different options. A method that you'll find yourself using a lot, for example, is set position. And that would be a way to move a player from one place to another when something happens. So let's say you wanted to create a jump and run game, and when the player falls off the map, you want to put them back to a checkpoint or something like that. You would use the set position method to do that. So the API is very, very helpful for finding these things that you need to use in your games. So don't sleep on it. You can use the AI to also reference it when you're trying to tell it what to do. That was a lot of information, but obviously you can use the AI to help you do a lot of this, but it's just important to understand exactly what's happening because the AI doesn't always get it right. But in this case, I could just ask the AI to please create another entity in this world that behaves just like the spider, but this time use the skeleton model, and watch what it does. So it writes all this code for you. It explains what it does, and if you hit apply, you can, review it and accept. But I'm going to just accept that really fast, and I'm going to hit save. And you can see the spider spawned in the world just fine. So obviously the AI can do a lot of this coding for you. It's just important to understand what it's doing to a certain extent. That way, if the AI gets it wrong, you have somewhat of idea of how to troubleshoot it. So enough of the hard stuff. Let's really fast go through the Hytopia map builder. So let's go to build.hytopia.com, and we're going to make a new map for our spider game because maybe we don't like this one. So it's pretty self-explanatory, but really fast just to go through it all. At the top, you've got your camera movement. So W is forward, S is backwards, and then A and D will look around. Your middle mouse scroll wheel will zoom in and out. If you click your middle mouse, you can pan left and right, and then your right click is going to rotate. Oh, and then spacebar is up and shift is down. On the left-hand side, you can see you've got all of these blocks. So let's just start with a grass block and go through some of these things on the bottom. Right on the left-hand side, you've got import and export. So when your map is done, you're obviously going to want to export it. But if you want to work on a map that's already existing, you can import one in here as well. And then you have your placement tools. So the plus is how you add a block. The minus is how you remove a block. You have an undo and a redo. And then you have these different block formations. So we've got the single block tool, but then you have these different patterns. So you've got a 5-block cross pattern, a 13-block diamond shape, and then you have a couple of rectangles. So we've got a 3x3 and a 4x4. In addition to that, you've got shape tools, which allow you kind of to do things a little more in bulk. So you can generate a solid cube, that's this first one, and you can give it a width, a length, and a height. So let's make 30 by 30 by 1 block high just to make a big platform of grass. And then the second tool is the generate a wall of blocks tool. This is basically like a border tool. So you can see we made a platform of grass because we had the grass block selected. But let's say we wanted to make a border out of something else. So we could select the stone bricks, for example, and then make our border. So we had it as 30 by 30, and let's make our border like 5 blocks high. Great. So now we have this cool arena. And then this other shape tool is like a terrain generator, which means it will make like a multi-level situation happening. So let's pick this sand block and let's just make like a small thing in the middle. So right now we're 30 by 30. Let's make like a 10 by 10 thing in the middle and make it kind of smooth. If you click clear existing map, it'll obviously delete everything that's there. I'm not going to do that. I just want to plop this right in the middle of what I have. So I'm going to hit generate. All right, and you can see it made this cool little sandy thing. And then we have a couple more tools. So you can change the grid size. Right now, this is a 100 by 100, but let's say you needed to make it a little bigger. You can make it 200 by 200, and it will give you a bigger grid. And then the delete will delete your map, and you can undo that. So don't do it unless you really want to get rid of it. All right, so I'm pretty happy with this. Now that it's done, I can hit export, and it's going to automatically download it to my downloads folder. So if I go to my downloads folder and I get that file out of there, I can just copy it. I can go to my game folder that I just made. So let's go to Push the Spider and Assets, and I'm going to go into Maps, and I'm going to paste it right in there. So now I've added my new map into the folder for my Push the Spider game. So back inside of Cursor, I'm going to scroll to the top. And where it says Import World Map From, instead of importing the boilerplate.json, I can import my new map that I just made, terrain.json. So I'm going to just change the name of this to terrain, and you can see it found it. And I'm going to hit save. And looks like our spider and our skeleton missed the platform, and it also looks like our textures didn't load, because you can see I'm not falling through the sky. I'm still walking. I don't have any textures to walk on. So something's definitely wrong. And let's just talk about how we could troubleshoot this. So just like how we're importing all this information from the server into the game, we're also importing the world map from this location. So let's just open up our world map that we just made, and let's compare it to the old one that was functioning. I can see what the problem is right now, actually. It's the same problem that we had at the beginning of the video. These are not the correct locations for these blocks. And that's because they literally just changed the file path for this initialization download. So this might be fixed even by the time you do this. But just in case it's not, let's just talk about how we can fix it. So I've got the terrain map opened in Cursor, and I've also opened the boilerplate one. And you can see, let's just talk about what this does really fast. So this is importing a bunch of blocks and a bunch of block locations. So in our new one, we have all these block types. Each block's given an ID, each block is given a name, and each block is given a URI to the texture, which is the location of the texture. And our problem right now is there is no textures folder anymore. These files are now contained in this blocks folder. And so the reason why the boilerplate map one worked is because when it imported all the blocks, it imported the correct locations for those blocks. So this is a very easy fix though. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy all of the block locations from the old map, and I'm going to replace it in the new one. So we're through 22, should be basically the same. So I'm going to I copied the one from the boilerplate, and I'm going to paste it over what I just imported. And then just to round out talking about this file really fast, after you've defined all your blocks, you have all your block locations. So you've got the X, the Y, and the Z, and then this number in yellow, that's the block ID that's assigned up here. So this first block right here is block ID 20. This is one of the stone bricks, so that's the border that we made. And you can see every block location for that whole map that we just made there. So I've replaced all of the URIs to match where they're actually located. So now I'm going to save this. And now I should be in the map, and I am. So you might not run into that issue. It might be fixed by the time you're watching this, but just in case it's not, you're going to run into issues like this all the time when you're making games. And it's just important to know that you can fix these things. You just have to figure out what information is not making it to the server that should be making it there. All right, so we have our new map, but you might notice that our spider and our skeleton are not here. And that's because, as we saw before, they spawned off the map. So we need to change their spawn locations so that they spawn on the map. So if you go back to the builder, you notice this top right-hand corner has some information. And what I found helpful is I can click in my map and it'll update this preview section to show you the location of the last block that you clicked. So I'm going to click over here to spawn. This is where I want to spawn my spider. And that's at X10, Y1, Z8. So if I go back into my index file and I find my spider, and this is where it's spawning, I'm going to just change my spawn coordinates now to that. So X10, Y1, Z8, X is 10. I'm actually not going to change my Y to 1. I'm just going to leave it where it's at because the Y is the height. So I'm going to keep it spawning up so it falls like into the right spot. So X10, Y10, and Z1. If I hit save, now if I look around, yep, there's my spider. And then same thing with the skeleton. Let's say I wanted to put the skeleton over here. X -8, Y1, Z -9. So X -8, I'm going to leave Y as 10 and Z was -9. Hit save. Go back to my thing and there's my skeleton. All right, so that wraps it up for today. We have done a lot, obviously. We've built our own map. We've learned how to spawn entities, how to create colliders for those entities. We learned how to look at the API to see different things that we can do with the collisions. And we even ran into some issues that we had to troubleshoot, which is always actually really helpful for learning. So I hope this was helpful for you. I've got a lot more videos planned, so definitely subscribe if you're wanting to learn more stuff about the Hytopia SDK. With that said, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.